Hello, and welcome to 15 Minutes in the Forest. I'm Karen Snape with Virginia Cooperative Extension, and today we're going to be learning about the Virginia Department of Forestry's Hardwood Initiative. I have a special guest here with me.
I'm Joe Rossetti. I'm the Hardwood Initiative Coordinator for the Virginia Department of Forestry.
Hardwood forests make up almost 80% of the forest in Virginia. That includes a little bit of mixed pine hardwood, like you see behind me here. And that accounts for 12.8 million acres of forest land. So the management of that land is important. It's something that has not really been focused on in the past. Most of our focus has been on our pine land. And so we're going to learn more today about what the Virginia Department of Forestry is doing to rectify that and to focus on the state's hardwood.
There's a general perception that hardwood forests take care of themselves, come back on their own, and we don't have to do a whole lot to make that happen or make it happen well. And there is some truth to that, in that their hardwood forests regenerate. Forest we're standing in has advanced regeneration in it, but when a forester looks at it, or when you look more closely at the regeneration, the trees in the regeneration layer aren't the same kind of trees in the overstory. And so if something happened to this stand of trees, if it were harvested, if there was a tornado or a hurricane or a bad fire, basically some big weather event that does a lot of damage in the stand, the trees that are here in the regeneration layer are the ones that are going to make up the next stand. And since they're different than what's in the overstory, then that means the next forest is going to be a different kind of forest. It'll still be hardwood, but it'll have different trees in it, different types of trees. And if that's not what you want as the landowner, then we have to do something to the forest in order to get the advanced regeneration you want to make up the next forest.
There are many reasons why the regeneration layer in a forest might be made up of different species than the mature trees, and why regeneration is such a challenge in our modern hardwood forests. The first is simply succession, the way that forests naturally change over time. Some hardwood trees, like tulip poplar, need full sunlight to grow, and even oaks need more sunlight than is typically found on the floor of a mature, closed canopy, undisturbed forest. Shade-tolerant species like beech, maple, and various shrubs will grow in the understory of these forests instead of the sun-loving or shade-intolerant species. Other factors that pose a challenge to quality hardwood regeneration include extensive deer browse, invasive species, and the exclusion of natural fire regimes. Here's another hardwood stand. This one has more in that regeneration layer. We have some hop hornbeam, some maples and sourwoods here in that regeneration layer under the mature white oak and mixed hardwood canopy. This is a small oak that stump sprouted, but as you can see, deer have browsed it, and it sprouts back after deer browse and sprouts back after deer browse and sprouts back after deer browse. But it's not going to, if nothing changes, ever become an oak in the mid or overstory of this forest, as long as it keeps getting pruned off by the deer like that. Here is an example of a hardwood forest with invasive microstygium or Japanese stilt grass growing in the understory. You can see the grass grows so thick that it makes it difficult for hardwood trees to regenerate. I've also seen this happen with Japanese honeysuckle. In this picture, in addition to the microstygium grass, the understory is full of American holly. American holly is a native tree with many wildlife benefits, but here it is growing very thick, almost forming a thicket, because fire has been excluded from this area for so long. In the past, fires, whether naturally or human managed fires, would have controlled some of this holly and made a more open understory. The Hardwood Initiative isn't only about oak trees, but oaks are some of the most valuable species for wildlife and some of the most economically valuable timber species. So it makes sense that oaks are a major part of most landowners' goals. Oaks are also hard to regenerate. Too much shade and they can't grow, but too much sun and they can't keep up with tulip poplar and other fast-growing sun-loving species. Oak seedlings need to be grown to a height of about 6 feet in partial shade conditions that keep those fast-growing species at bay while still providing enough light for the oak. Once they reach 6 feet tall, they're considered advanced regeneration, and they're likely to make up a major component of the future forest. Other types of trees might achieve advanced regeneration status at only 2 or 4 feet tall. Here we have an area that was harvested without significant advanced oak regeneration. So this stand had a lot of oak in the overstory, and you can see there's still some mostly chestnut and scarlet oak here, but it didn't have very much advanced regeneration, and so when it was harvested, it came back mostly in poplar and black locust, which are sun-loving early successional trees that grow easily in areas where there is full sunlight and spread easily by seed. It's because of all of these factors that the Department of Forestry has developed the Hardwood Initiative.
The goal of the Hardwood Initiative is to improve the hardwood stands in Virginia for current landowners and your successors and the future landowners.
To get started, you should contact your local DOF forester. You can find your forester by going to the DOF webpage and picking your county from the Find a Forester drop-down menu.
In order to help you, your forester is going to need to understand your goals for your forest land.
Exactly what the landowner wants out of the forest, and what your objective is has a big impact on what we do in the forest too. Lots of landowners are interested in managing for wildlife habitat for a particular species, and different kinds of wildlife need different kinds of things in the forest. So we can manage the forest to make the right wildlife habitat for the species you want. Some landowners are more interested in timber income, and some are more interested in ecological health. And so regardless, there's something to do to the forest to make it better for any one of those objectives.
Then, your forester is going to need some information about your forest, which will likely involve a field visit to take plots, measure and count trees, and develop a scientific understanding of your current forest conditions.
In addition to on-the-ground forest improvement, one of the goals of the Hardwood Initiative is to train foresters, both DOF and private sector, in hardwood management. On this day, Joe is training new DOF forester Audrey in the use of a hardwood forest assessment tool. The two of them go through the steps a forester would take to gather information about your forest. They are preparing to take sample plots throughout the forest, figuring up how many they'll need to estimate the condition of the forest, and getting the forms they'll use to record the data ready. Now they're using a tool called a 10-factor prism. It looks like just a wedge of glass, but it's carefully calibrated to tell foresters basal area, the amount of space occupied by trees. They're also recording the species of those trees and whether the tree is in the canopy, the understory, or somewhere in between. Now they're taking a fixed radius plot and counting advanced regeneration, the future stand. They'll count oaks and some other species if they're at least 6 feet tall, but other species at 2 foot or 4 foot high.
Joe, Audrey, or your local forester will put all of that information into one of 3 versions of a spreadsheet based on your goals. The results will tell them how well the forest is meeting your goals and enable them to make recommendations to improve your forest. It'll also be a way to measure the success of any practices that you do decide to implement. Some of the recommendations that they might make include
So sometimes all we need to do is remove the trees that are that have taken up the space in the mid-story and are advanced regeneration, like this black gum and this hickory and this hickory and this sourwood. And if we remove those, then more light would be able to get to the ground through the canopy of the forest and into the ground, and get enough, just the right amount of light to grow oak seedlings. And once the oak seedlings are well established, then if there's a canopy gap, they'll be able to make it up there instead of these other trees. Another practice in some forests is what we call timber stand improvement, and that can take lots of different, that can look like a lot of different things in different forests, but often that's removing trees from the canopy and the mid-story that we just don't want to make up the next forest or to be taking up growing space. Sometimes we'll do that in stands of large trees like this, or in stands of smaller trees as the canopy is developing. One we get asked about a lot is prescribed burning. Fire can be really beneficial in a stand. It can also do a lot of damage in a stand. So there is a lot of information out and available about the benefits of fire, but the benefits really have to be weighed against the potential risks on an individual property and for a landowner to decide if it's the right tool. But fire can also have a big impact on mid-story trees, but once they get up to about 3 or 4 inches diameter, then fire doesn't impact them as easily. So when they're small, it can help to keep them small. Fire is something that has to be reapplied and done every couple of years usually to get the benefits from it. But there can be a lot of wildlife benefits from fire also, in terms of creating more snags, if that's needed for your species of interest, increasing forage and forb development and fruit production. So there can be other benefits from fire too, other than just in what the impact is on the trees. There's something we call periodic partial harvesting, and there's a few different ways to do that, but they all involve entering the stand several times over many years to finish regeneration of the stand and remove trees from the stand and commercially and be able to sell them. Clear cutting is also sometimes done in hardwoods, and if there's really good advanced regeneration, then that can be a great practice. It's also a good practice to regenerate trees that regenerate in full sunlight instead of in understories. So if that's what you're after and it's appropriate for the site and there's a good yellow poplar seed source, then clear cutting can be a great way to get yellow poplar.
And some of these that you're mentioning that are non-commercial, that would not generate income for the landowner, might actually cost the landowner money, but there is some funding associated with the Hardwood Initiative that can help to offset some of that?
Yes, first off, the biggest benefit that you get as the landowner from doing these practices needed in the forest is you get a forest that's more of how you want it to be. So that's the biggest benefit, even if you have to spend some money on it, you get a product that is more of what you want it to be. But there is some financial assistance available from the Department of Forestry for doing some of these practices. There's also funding available from other agencies, the Natural Resources Conservation Service being the biggest one. So contact your area forester for their technical expertise to help to determine what practice is going to be appropriate for you and your stand. And then once we know what practice is best, then we'll see if there's funding available to help you do that.
So now that you know a little bit more about Virginia's Hardwood Initiative, please reach out to your local forester to see how your property might benefit. That's all I have for you today. Thank you for joining me for 15 Minutes in the Forest. We look forward to seeing you next time.